I got a hot slap on my face from my daughter-in-law, Naomi. The slap landed so hard my glasses flew off and clattered across the hardwood floor. For a moment, I thought I was dreaming. But then I saw her, the girl I once rocked to sleep, standing over me with fire in her eyes. Hello family, welcome back. Before we begin, I have a heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. My daughter-in-law, Naomi, her manicured hand still trembling from the impact, her voice trembling but filled with arrogance. "Give me the house keys," she hissed. "And the documents. This house isn't yours anymore." My chest tightened. "What did you just say?" I asked softly, my hand pressed against my cheek that still stung from her palm. "You heard me," she said, tilting her head with that mocking smile she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. "Ethan said you're moving out today. You've been here long enough." Ethan, my only son. He stood at the doorway, not meeting my eyes. His shoulders hunched under the weight of his silence, but he didn't move to stop her. Not a word, not a glance. The man I carried for 9 months, nursed through sickness, and prayed for through college, just stood there like a stranger. "Naomi," I said quietly, trying to steady my voice. "You don't talk to me like that in my own home." She laughed, a sharp, cold sound that pierced through me. "You're home. Oh, please, this house is in Ethan's name now. You signed the papers yourself, remember?" My knees almost buckled. I remembered signing something months ago. Ethan said it was a refinance agreement. "To help you with the bills, Mom," he told me. I trusted him. I trusted them both. Now Naomi stood before me, in my living room, wearing a silk robe and gold earrings that gleamed in the morning light, telling me I no longer belonged. "I didn't know," I whispered, mostly to myself. "I didn't know you'd." "Didn't know? That's your problem," Naomi snapped, stepping closer. "You never pay attention. Always trying to control everything, acting like you're still in charge. Well, guess what, Gloria? You're not." I flinched when she called me by my first name. Not Mom. Not mother-in-law. Just Gloria, like I was some tenant who'd overstayed her welcome. Rain began tapping at the window behind her, soft at first, then harder. I could smell the storm before I heard the thunder. Ethan finally looked up, his face pale. "Naomi, maybe this isn't the right time." "The right time?" She spun toward him, her voice rising. "She's been living here rent-free for years, eating our food, using our electricity, walking around like she owns the place. I want her gone today, Ethan. I'm done living under her shadow." Each word was a knife, carving away at the love I once felt for her. I turned toward my son. "Ethan, please. I raised you better than this." He rubbed his temples, avoiding my eyes. "Mom, maybe it's just for a while. We all need space. Naomi's been stressed." "Stressed?" I cut in, disbelief thick in my voice. "I cooked, cleaned, helped raise your children, and gave you this house. And now you're saying I should leave because your wife is stressed." Naomi folded her arms, lips curling. "Exactly." My breath caught in my throat. It was as if every memory of love, every sacrifice, was being thrown out like garbage. I glanced around the room, the framed photos on the mantel, the rocking chair I used when the twins were born, the Afghan blanket I crocheted one winter when money was tight. Every corner held a piece of my life. And now it meant nothing. "Where will I go?" I asked softly. Naomi's voice was ice. "That's not my problem." She held out her hand. "Keys. Now." When I didn't move fast enough, she stepped closer, snatched the ring from the table, and turned toward the door. My son followed her without a word. The storm outside had grown wild. Lightning flashed, and the room lit up in a burst of white before going dim again. The rain beat against the windows like a warning. I stood there, staring at the door long after it slammed. My body trembled, but not from fear, from anger. From betrayal. So deep I could taste it. I grabbed my old cardigan from the chair, the one with the missing buttons, and slipped my feet into worn slippers. The house suddenly felt colder, emptier. As I stepped outside, the rain soaked through my clothes almost instantly. My gray hair clung to my face, and the gravel beneath my feet turned slick. But I kept walking down the driveway, past the rose bushes I planted the year Ethan was born, past the mailbox where I used to wait for his college letters. I reached the road and turned back one last time. The house, my house, glowed behind the rain, its lights warm and alive, but I knew I was no longer welcome there. I wiped the rain from my face, though I wasn't sure if it was rain or tears anymore. I had nowhere to go, no one to call. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, "This isn't the end." Naomi thought she'd won. She thought an old woman like me would break easily, but she didn't know me. I was about to remind them both exactly who built that home, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. And this time, I wouldn't be signing anything away. The next morning, I woke up in the back pew of St. Michael's Church. My clothes were still damp, and the cold air that crept through the cracks in the old building gnawed at my bones. I must have dozed off after praying, if you could call it praying. I didn't have words left for God last night, only silence and trembling. Father Raymond found me there just after sunrise. "Gloria," he said softly, holding a thermos of coffee in one hand. His voice was gentle, the same voice that had blessed Ethan's baptism 40 years ago. "What on earth happened to you?" I tried to speak, but my lips quivered before any words came out. He placed the thermos beside me and draped a blanket over my shoulders. The warmth of it nearly broke me. I hadn't realized how cold I was until then. "Sit, Father," I whispered. "Please." He sat beside me, his eyes filled with quiet concern. "You don't have to explain if you're not ready." But I needed to. If I didn't let the words out, I'd drown in them. "My daughter-in-law," I began, my voice trembling. She slapped me yesterday. Right in my own house. Then she told me to leave. Father Raymond's eyes widened. "What? Why would Naomi?" I shook my head. "I don't even understand it myself. I thought I was helping them. I gave them the house to make things easier. I trusted Ethan. And now it's gone." He was silent for a moment, letting me cry without interrupting. The church was empty except for us and the faint hum of the morning wind. After a while, he said, "You've always been generous to a fault, Gloria. But even kindness can be taken advantage of." His words cut deep because they were true. I thought of Ethan's childhood, how I'd worked 2 jobs after my husband died just to keep the roof over our heads. I remembered sewing his school uniforms by candlelight, selling my wedding ring to pay his college tuition, and skipping meals so he'd never have to. And Naomi, oh, I remember the first time she came home to meet me. Pretty as a picture, with her shiny black curls and sharp green eyes that noticed every little thing in my living room. I had been so nervous that day. I cooked her favorite meal, even asked Ethan what perfume she liked, so I could wear something she'd find pleasant. But somewhere along the line, she decided I was beneath her. I just never thought Ethan would stand by and let it happen. Father Raymond reached for my hand. "You're not alone, Gloria. You still have friends. You can stay here for a while if you need." I nodded, though shame burned inside me. "I can't live in a church forever." He smiled faintly. "No, but maybe just long enough to rest. Then, when you're ready, you can start thinking about what comes next." What comes next? The words echoed in my head long after he left to prepare for morning mass. I stayed sitting there, staring at the cross above the altar. What comes next, indeed? I had no family willing to take me in, no money beyond my small monthly pension, and no place to go. The thought of starting over at 74 felt impossible. But then I remembered something Ethan and Naomi didn't know. A letter. It was from my late husband's lawyer, sealed and kept in my old sewing box, the one I hid in the attic. Inside that letter were details about a trust fund, one meant for emergencies. I never touched it because I wanted Ethan to have a comfortable future. They thought they took everything from me, but maybe, just maybe, that letter could be my way back. I just had to get it, but that meant returning to the house. The idea made my heart race. Naomi would lose her mind if she saw me near the door again. And Ethan, well, I didn't know what he'd do anymore. Still, that letter was mine. My husband left it for me. That night, after Father Raymond locked up, I waited. When the streetlights flickered on, I walked the 2 miles back home, keeping close to the shadows. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick and heavy with mist. When I reached the gate, I froze. Naomi's silver Lexus was parked in the driveway. Through the living room window, I saw warm light flickering across the curtains, and the sound of laughter drifted through the air. They were having dinner, my son and his wife, laughing. In my home, I crept along the side of the house toward the back porch, where the old window latch was still loose. I told Ethan to fix it years ago. He never did. Carefully, I pushed the window open and climbed inside. The faint smell of roasted chicken and vanilla candles filled the air. I slipped my shoes off and tiptoed toward the attic stairs. Every creak in the floorboards sounded like thunder in my ears. Finally, I reached the attic. Dust motes floated in the air as I opened the small wooden box beneath the old sewing table. My hands shook as I lifted the envelope, yellowed but intact. The lawyer's name still printed in bold letters across the top. I tucked it into my cardigan pocket, whispering, "Thank you, Robert," to my late husband. Just as I turned to leave, I heard footsteps downstairs. Heavy, uneven. Naomi's voice echoed faintly. "Ethan, did you hear something?" My heart pounded, so hard I thought it would give me away. I froze in the shadows, clutching the letter. She climbed halfway up the stairs before Ethan's voice stopped her. "It's probably the wind, Naomi. Let it go." She huffed and turned back. When I finally stepped out into the night, the air felt different, charged. That single envelope in my pocket felt like the weight of the world. I didn't know what was inside yet, but I knew one thing. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about taking my life back. As I walked toward the church again, the mist cleared, and I could see the faint outline of dawn rising. Maybe God hadn't abandoned me after all. By the time the sun rose, I had barely slept. The letter sat on the pew beside me, its edges slightly damp from the mist of last night. I stared at it for hours, afraid to open it and afraid not to. What if it was just another false hope? What if all that sneaking back into the house had been for nothing? But deep down, something told me Robert wouldn't have left me empty-handed. He'd always been careful, steady, the kind of man who planned for the future even when I couldn't see beyond the day's bills. Finally, as the first light filtered through the stained-glass windows, I broke the seal. The letter was written in Robert's lawyer's tidy handwriting. My eyes blurred as I read, "In the event of my death, my wife, Gloria Harper, shall retain sole ownership of the Harper residence and any trust accounts associated with it. The property shall not be transferred, refinanced, or co-owned without her explicit written consent, verified by a notary. A copy of this letter and associated documents is secured at Hamilton and Lewis Law Firm." My hands trembled. My breath caught in my chest. They had lied to me. Ethan and Naomi had forged my signature or tricked me into signing something I didn't understand. But the law was on my side. The realization washed over me like fire. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't some old woman with nowhere to go. I was still Robert's wife. And that house, my home, was still mine. I stood up, clutching the letter tight. "Thank you, Robert," I whispered again. But this time, it wasn't through tears, it was through resolve. Still, I knew I had to be careful. Naomi was smart. Too smart. The kind who knew how to twist things, how to smile sweetly in public and strike hard in private. And Ethan, my poor son, was too weak to see through her games. I couldn't just storm in waving the letter. I needed help. Someone who could handle this quietly, legally. That's when I thought of Denise. Denise Monroe had been my neighbor for 20 years before she moved across town. A retired attorney, sharp as a tack and twice as stubborn. She used to joke that she'd go to court in her hospital gown if it meant defending a friend. I called her that morning using the church phone. "Gloria," she said, her voice instantly warm but laced with concern. "It's been forever. What's going on?" I need your help," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Within an hour, Denise pulled up in her old blue Buick outside the church. She looked exactly the same. Short, silver curls, sharp glasses, and that no-nonsense walk that could scare a judge. When she saw me, her expression softened. "Honey, what happened to you?" I told her everything. The slap, the eviction, the tricked signature, and finally the letter. She listened without interrupting once. Then she leaned back and whistled low. "Well, Gloria, they messed with the wrong woman. This letter is gold." "You really think so?" "I know so. If what you're saying checks out, And I believe it does. Then Naomi and Ethan just committed fraud. That house is legally yours. You could have them out by next week. I blinked back tears. I don't want revenge, Denise. I just want my home back. She nodded slowly. Then we'll do it right. No screaming, no chaos. Just the law. The quiet kind of justice that leaves people speechless. We spent the rest of the morning at her kitchen table, sipping tea while she made calls to the Hamilton and Lewis law firm. When the clerk confirmed the documents were still on file, Denise's eyes gleamed. Perfect. We'll get certified copies, file a case if necessary, and I'll handle the correspondence. You won't lift a finger. For the first time in days, I felt something warm inside me. Hope. By evening, I was settled on Denise's couch with a hot meal and clean clothes she'd pulled from her closet. You're staying here for now, she said firmly. No arguments. I smiled weakly. You haven't changed one bit. Neither have you, she said, then paused. You've just forgotten who you are for a while. Her words struck me deeply. That night, as I lay in her guest room, I replayed every moment of my downfall, each small way I'd let Naomi take control. It started with simple things, letting her handle the bills, agreeing when she suggested putting my name jointly on accounts, staying quiet when she disrespected me in front of Ethan. Every time, I told myself it wasn't worth fighting, that peace was better than pride. But peace bought with silence isn't peace, it's surrender. And I had surrendered too much. As I drifted toward sleep, I heard Denise's voice faintly from the kitchen, speaking into the phone. Yes, this is Attorney Monroe. I'll be representing Mrs. Harper in the property dispute against her son and daughter-in-law. My heart clenched, but not in fear this time. In gratitude. Maybe God had sent me back to that house for a reason. Maybe Robert's letter wasn't just about the house. It was about reminding me that I still had strength left. The next morning, Denise drove us to the law office to retrieve the official records. I wore my best dress, the one I'd kept folded neatly in a suitcase for years, the same one I wore at Ethan's college graduation. I wanted to look like a woman who hadn't been defeated. When the lawyer placed the notarized documents in front of me, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Proof. Solid proof. Denise looked at me and said quietly, "Are you ready to take your house back?" I nodded, holding the papers close to my chest. Yes, but not the way they expect. Denise smiled knowingly. Good, because when we're done, Naomi's going to wish she'd never raised that hand at you. I didn't smile back. I wasn't thinking about punishment. I was thinking about dignity, about the home that held my husband's memory, my son's laughter, and the life I'd built from scratch. I was going to reclaim it, not through anger, through grace and truth. Still, deep down, I knew Naomi wouldn't go quietly. And I was right, because that very evening, when Denise and I returned to her house, Naomi's black SUV was parked out front. She was waiting. Naomi stood by her SUV with her arms crossed, one manicured hand clutching a designer handbag as if it were a weapon. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in her jaw, the flash of hostility in her eyes. She looked out of place in Denise's quiet suburban street, like a viper dropped into a garden. "Don't say a word," Denise murmured beside me as she locked her car door. "Let's hear what she wants." Naomi's heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she approached. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said, her tone sweet as poison. "I should have known you'd run crying to someone. Couldn't face the consequences of your own choices, huh?" I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm. I didn't run. I was thrown out. Naomi's smile faltered, just for a second. Then she straightened, flicking her hair back. "You're dramatic as always. You signed the house over to Ethan months ago. Don't act like you didn't." Denise stepped forward. "Actually," she said, her tone professional and steady, "Mrs. Harper didn't. She was deceived into signing a document under false pretenses. We've already verified the property deed and accompanying trust documents with Hamilton and Lewis law firm. Gloria remains the sole legal owner of that house." Naomi's face drained of color. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." Denise pulled a folder from her bag. "This is a copy of the verified deed. If you or your husband attempt to evict her again, you'll be facing not only a lawsuit for property fraud but also potential criminal charges." Naomi's jaw dropped. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm very serious," Denise replied coolly. You might want to talk to your husband before you dig yourself deeper. For once, Naomi was speechless. She glanced at me, eyes blazing. You think this is over, old woman? You think you can just waltz back in and take everything? I finally looked her in the eye. No, Naomi. I'm not taking everything. I'm just taking back what's mine. Her lips tightened into a sneer. You're pathetic. Maybe, I said softly, but at least I can look myself in the mirror. Denise touched my arm lightly. Let's go inside, Gloria. We walked past her, leaving Naomi frozen on the sidewalk, her perfectly composed world beginning to crack. Inside, Denise let out a long breath. Well, that went better than I expected. I sat down slowly on her couch, hands trembling. I didn't think she'd actually follow me here. Oh, she's panicking, Denise said, pouring me a cup of tea. She knows what's coming. When people like Naomi realize their power is slipping, they lash out. She'll make a scene, maybe try to manipulate Ethan, but don't you worry. The law's on your side now. But I wasn't thinking about legal papers. I was thinking about my son. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Ethan's face, the little boy who used to run barefoot in the yard, chasing fireflies, who'd hold my hand during thunderstorms and say, "Don't worry, Mama, I'll protect you one day." What happened to that boy? How did he become a man who let his wife throw his own mother out into the rain? The next morning, I decided to find out. Denise offered to drive me, but I needed to do this alone. I put on my old coat, the one with worn-out buttons and a tear near the pocket, and took the early bus across town. The city passed by in gray smears through the window, coffee shops opening, kids running to school, couples walking hand in hand. I felt invisible among them, but strangely calm. When I reached my old neighborhood, I stood across the street from my house for several minutes. The lawn was trimmed perfectly, Naomi's doing, no doubt, and the curtains I'd sewn myself still hung in the windows. Ethan came out to take out the trash. For a second, I didn't recognize him. He looked older, heavier, his eyes sunken from sleepless nights. Guilt had a way of aging people faster than time ever could. "Ethan," I called softly. He froze, the trash bag slipping from his hand. "Mom!" I walked closer, heart pounding. "We need to talk." He glanced toward the door, clearly afraid Naomi might hear. "This isn't a good time." "I don't care," I said. "You made it clear my timing doesn't matter anymore. But you're still my son, and I need to understand." His shoulders slumped. "It's complicated." "No," I said, shaking my head. "It's not. You let that woman slap me, take my house, and throw me out like a stranger. You stood there and said nothing. Why?" He rubbed his face, sighing. "Mom, you don't understand what it's like living with Naomi. She's controlling. She threatens me, manipulates everything I do. I thought signing the house over would make her happy, that she'd finally stop fighting me. So you sacrificed your own mother's dignity to buy peace," I said quietly. He winced. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," I said, my voice breaking. "And I had to sleep in a church because of it." Tears welled in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't know she—" "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "You knew exactly what she was capable of. You just hoped she wouldn't go that far." He looked at me helplessly, like the boy I used to protect. "I have proof now, Ethan," I said, my tone firm. "Legal proof. The house is still mine. I'm not here to fight you, but I won't be silent anymore." Before he could respond, the door burst open. Naomi stood there, face pale with fury. "You're not supposed to be here," she shouted. "How dare you come to my property?" "Your property?" I said, turning toward her. "Funny, the law says otherwise." Her expression twisted. "You think a piece of paper will save you? Ethan, call the police." He didn't move. Naomi's voice rose to a shrill scream. "Did you hear me? Call them." But Ethan stayed frozen, staring at me. Then, slowly, he said, "No." Naomi spun toward him, eyes wide. "What did you just say?" He took a step forward. "I said no, Naomi. She's my mother, and I'm done letting you control everything." Her jaw dropped. "Ethan!" But he kept going. "I've made a lot of mistakes, Mom," he said, his voice trembling. "But not anymore. You have every right to that house." I stared at him, hardly breathing. For the first time, I saw the man I'd raised, not the boy she'd broken. Naomi's eyes filled with fury. "You'll regret this, both of you," she hissed. Then she stormed back inside, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Ethan stood there, shoulders shaking, tears streaming down his face. I placed a trembling hand on his arm. "You did the right thing, son. It's not too late." He nodded, looking broken. "I just don't know what to do now." "Start by being honest, with yourself, with her, with me," I said softly. "The rest will follow." He nodded again, wiping his face. "Mom, can I come see you later?" I smiled faintly. "I'll be waiting." As I walked away, the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting warm light over the neighborhood. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things could heal. But I was wrong. Because that evening, while Denise and I were reviewing the legal papers again, the phone rang. Denise answered, her expression changing instantly. She handed me the receiver with trembling fingers. "Gloria, it's Ethan," she whispered. I pressed the phone to my ear. "Ethan, what's wrong?" His voice was frantic, shaking. "Mom, it's Naomi. She's gone crazy. She's threatening to burn the house down." For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The line crackled in my ear, Ethan's voice trembling through it. "Ethan, listen to me," I said firmly, gripping the receiver. "Where are you right now?" I'm outside," he stammered. "She locked herself inside the house, Mom. She's screaming, throwing things. I tried to get the kids to my neighbor's place, but..." My heart clenched. "Are the children safe?" "Yes," he said breathlessly. "They're next door. But she's talking about setting fire to the place. I can smell gas. Mom, what do I do?" My blood went cold. Denise snatched her car keys from the table. "We're going," she said. "Now." We sped through the wet streets, the city lights blurring past us. My hands shook in my lap, the lawyer's envelope still tucked inside my coat pocket. I had thought the nightmare was ending, that the truth would set things right. But now, it was spiraling into something far darker. When we turned onto my old street, the flashing red and blue lights of emergency vehicles filled the night. 2 police cruisers blocked the road. Smoke curled up from one of the front windows. I could hear shouting, Ethan's voice somewhere in the chaos. I pushed the car door open before Denise could stop me. "Gloria, wait!" But I was already running. The smell of gasoline hit me first. Sharp, acrid, wrong. "Ethan!" I cried, my voice breaking. "Where is she?" He turned, his face streaked with sweat and soot. "Mom, she's inside. I try to stop her. She's not listening." 2 firefighters rushed past us toward the porch. I could hear Naomi's muffled screams from inside, half anger, half panic. "Naomi!" I shouted, stumbling toward the door. "Don't do this." A police officer grabbed my arm. "Ma'am, you can't go in there. It's not safe." "She's my daughter-in-law," I said, voice trembling. "Please, just let me talk to her." Before he could respond, there was a loud crash, a window shattering, and Naomi's voice cut through the air. "You ruined everything, Gloria. You took everything from me." I froze. The officer moved toward the door, but Ethan broke free from another cop and ran up the steps. "Naomi, please open the door. This isn't the way." Another crash. Then silence. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then, suddenly, Naomi stumbled out the front door, coughing and sobbing, her robe singed at the sleeve. The firefighters grabbed her, pulling her away as smoke billowed out behind her. I fell to my knees in the driveway, tears streaming down my face. The house, the place where I'd built my entire life, was burning. Flames licked at the curtains, climbed the staircase, devouring everything I'd held on to. I couldn't even scream. Ethan knelt beside me, clutching my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry. I never thought it would come to this." I looked at him, barely hearing his words. My mind was somewhere else, inside that burning house, in every room where I'd left a piece of myself. The rocking chair where I'd nursed him as a baby, the framed photo of Robert on the mantel, the old Afghan blanket folded by the window seat. Gone. All gone. But beneath the grief, there was something else, something fierce and steady. A strange calm. When the flames finally died down, the firefighters let us approach what was left. The roof had caved in. The air reeked of smoke and wet ash. My heart ached, But as I stood there watching, I realized something I hadn't before. That house had been my prison as much as my home. I tied my worth to its walls, my love to its rooms. But Naomi couldn't burn who I was. She could only burn what I owned. And I was still standing. Ethan was beside me, his face streaked with tears. "Mom, what are we going to do?" I looked at him for a long moment. "We're going to start over," I said quietly. "Together, if you're willing." He nodded slowly. "I want to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes." Denise came over, her coat pulled tight around her. "Gloria," she said gently, "the police are taking Naomi in for questioning. They found gas cans in the kitchen. This won't go well for her." I didn't respond right away. I just stared at the smoldering remains of my life. "She needs help, Denise. She's broken inside." Denise's voice softened. "You're still thinking like a mother." "Maybe," I said. "But someone has to." A firefighter approached and handed me something wrapped in a singed towel. "Ma'am, we found this near what used to be your sewing table." It looked important. I unwrapped it slowly and gasped. It was Robert's wedding band. The gold was blackened with soot, but the engraving inside was still clear. "Forever yours, G.H." I clutched it in my palm, feeling the metal warm against my skin. A tear slid down my cheek, but this time, it wasn't out of sorrow. It was strength. Later that night, after giving our statements, Ethan and I sat in Denise's car in silence. The city lights blurred through my tears. He finally spoke. "Mom, I don't deserve your forgiveness." I looked at him, my voice soft but steady. "Forgiveness isn't about deserving, Ethan. It's about surviving." He nodded, staring down at his hands. "What's going to happen now?" I smiled faintly. "I'll rebuild. I've done it before. I can do it again." He turned toward me, eyes full of guilt. "Can I help you this time?" I reached over and took his hand. That's all I ever wanted. As Denise drove us away from the ruins of the house, I watched the glow fade in the distance. I thought that losing my home would destroy me. But maybe it was freeing me instead. Freeing me from the years of silence, from the weight of pleasing others, from the fear of starting over. Sometimes, life has to burn to the ground before new roots can grow. I turned to Ethan and whispered, "Tomorrow we start fresh." He nodded. "Tomorrow." But as I glanced at the rearview mirror, a shadow of worry crept into my chest. Because I knew Naomi, and she wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat easily. And as the night swallowed the last of the flames, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not yet. The morning after the fire smelled of damp ash and endings. When I opened my eyes, the faint sunlight pushing through Denise's guest room curtains looked dull and heavy. My body ached, but it wasn't just age. It was the weight of everything that had burned the night before. Downstairs, Denise was already on the phone. I could hear her steady voice through the door. Calm, composed, the way lawyers get when the world is falling apart. "Yes, officer, we'll come down to the station this afternoon. Yes, Mrs. Harper is here with me." I pushed myself up slowly, gripping the edge of the nightstand. The smell of coffee drifted up from the kitchen, mixed with the faint scent of smoke that clung to my clothes no matter how much I washed them. When I came downstairs, Denise looked up. "You didn't have to wake so early." "I didn't sleep much," I said, lowering myself into the chair. "Any news?" She sighed, handing me a cup. "Naomi's being held overnight. They're charging her with arson and attempted destruction of property. The police said it's a miracle no one was hurt." Ethan stayed to give a full statement. My hand shook slightly as I took the cup. "He shouldn't be alone." "He isn't," Denise said softly. "The police are keeping an eye on him." "But Gloria," she hesitated, folding her hands. "You need to decide what you want to do now. The insurance company will be calling soon. The property is still legally yours. You could rebuild or sell what's left." I stared into the coffee, watching the dark surface ripple. "That house was my life, Denise. But maybe it's time I build a new one somewhere peace can live." Denise nodded approvingly. "That sounds like wisdom." But peace was still far away. By afternoon, Ethan came to Denise's house looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, voice hoarse. "They're keeping her in custody, Mom. She's refusing to talk to anyone, not even a lawyer." I swallowed hard. "Do they know why she did it?" He shook his head. "They found out she'd been secretly taking money from our accounts." Gambling, maybe. Some online debts. She must have panicked when she realized the house wasn't really hers. I sighed deeply. She wasn't just greedy, Ethan. She was lost. He sank into the chair beside me. I don't even know who I married anymore. You married someone who wore charm like a mask, I said quietly. But masks always crack when the light hits them. For a while, we sat in silence, listening to the wind hum against the windows. Denise left us alone, probably sensing we needed it. Finally, Ethan spoke. Mom, I keep replaying everything in my head. All those times you tried to warn me about her, and I told you were overreacting. I thought I was protecting her, but I was just protecting my own pride. I placed my hand over his. You're protecting your family now. That's what matters. He looked up, eyes wet. Can we start over? Just you and me and the kids. I nodded slowly. Yes, but we'll do it differently this time. No lies. No silence. We rebuild with truth or not at all. That night, after Ethan left to check on the children, I sat in Denise's living room staring at the ring I'd found in the ashes, the one that had belonged to Robert. Its surface was still scorched black in spots, but the engraving inside remained untouched. Forever yours, G.H. For years I thought Robert's message was about love that never ends. But maybe it was also about endurance. About surviving what tries to destroy you. I pressed the ring to my chest and whispered, I'm still here, Robert. The next few days passed in a blur of paperwork. Insurance claims, statements, phone calls from reporters. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Why would a daughter-in-law do that? I didn't have an answer. Some wounds can't be explained. They just fester until they erupt. But amid the chaos, something unexpected began to happen. People from the neighborhood started reaching out. Old friends brought food. Former church members offered to help rebuild. Even Father Raymond showed up one afternoon, his hands full of groceries and his face full of warmth. I told you, Gloria, he said as he hugged me. You're not alone. I smiled through tears. I almost forgot how that felt. A week later, Denise drove me to the courthouse. Naomi's arraignment. Ethan didn't want me to go, but I needed closure, not revenge, not spectacle, just peace. When we entered the courtroom, Naomi sat at the defendant's table, her wrists cuffed, her eyes dull. Her once perfect hair hung limp, makeup gone. She looked smaller, like the fire had burned away her arrogance too. When she saw me, she froze. For a moment, I thought I saw something flicker behind her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or shame. The judge read out the charges. Arson. Endangerment. Property fraud. Her voice was calm, clipped, efficient. Like justice itself didn't need emotion to exist. Then the judge asked if the property owner wished to make a statement. Denise touched my arm. You don't have to. But I stood anyway. My voice trembled at first, then grew steadier with every word. Your Honor, I said. The woman sitting there hurt me deeply. She took my home, my dignity, and almost my life. But I'm not here to ask for punishment. I'm here to ask for understanding. Some people destroy because they've forgotten how to build. Naomi forgot. And maybe one day, when she's ready to remember, she'll start again. But I can't carry her hate anymore. I have my own rebuilding to do. The courtroom went silent. Even Naomi stared at me, her eyes wet. The judge nodded slowly. Thank you, Mrs. Harper. That will be entered into record. When I turned to leave, Naomi's voice stopped me. Gloria, I'm sorry. I didn't turn around. I just whispered, I know, and walked away. Outside, Ethan was waiting by the courthouse steps. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Mom, you forgave her? I smiled faintly. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, Ethan. It just means I won't let her fire live inside me anymore. He nodded, silent tears rolling down his cheeks. As we drove away, I looked out the window at the sun breaking through the clouds. The sky was brighter than it had been in weeks. Denise glanced at me from the driver's seat. So what now? I smiled, looking at the horizon. Now I built something new. Something mine. Maybe a little house near the lake. A garden. A porch swing for the kids. She grinned. And maybe a lock Naomi can't break. I laughed softly. That too. As the road stretched ahead of us, I slipped Robert's ring back onto my finger. The metal was still warm from my hand, gleaming faintly in the sunlight. For the first time in a long time, the world felt open again, full of second chances instead of ashes. But as Denise turned the car down the winding road toward the edge of town, my phone buzzed in my purse. A number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before answering. "Hello!" A familiar voice whispered through the line. Hoarse, shaky, desperate. "Mrs. Harper, it's Naomi. Please, you have to listen. There's something you don't know. About Robert. About the house. About why I did all of this." The line went dead. For a long time after the call ended, I just sat there, phone in my hand, heart thudding in my chest. Denise's voice faint in the background. "Gloria, you all right?" I blinked, realizing the color must have drained from my face. "It was Naomi," I said quietly. "She just called me." Denise frowned, eyes darting briefly to the road. "Naomi? From jail? What did she say?" I swallowed hard. "She said there's something I don't know about Robert, about the house, and about why she did everything." Denise's expression hardened. "It could be manipulation. Don't fall for it." "Maybe," I murmured, staring out the window as the scenery blurred by. "But she sounded terrified, Denise. Not angry. Just desperate." "Desperate people lie," Denise said firmly. "Especially ones facing prison time." But I wasn't sure. I'd seen Naomi angry. I'd seen her proud, cruel, defiant. I had never heard fear in her voice before. That night, I barely slept. The questions clawed at me. What could she possibly know about Robert? He'd been gone for nearly 12 years. A heart attack, quick and cruel. I'd buried him with the ring she'd almost destroyed. At dawn, I made up my mind. "I'm going to the jail," I told Denise over breakfast. She nearly choked on her coffee. "The what?" "I need to hear what she has to say," I said. "If it's another lie, then at least I'll know. But if it's not..." Denise sighed, rubbing her temples. "You always were too soft-hearted for your own good." "Not soft," I said. "Just unfinished." She stared at me for a moment, then nodded. "Fine, but I'm coming with you." The county jail was cold, gray, and full of echoes. The fluorescent lights hummed above us as we were led down a narrow hallway. I could smell metal and disinfectant, and something else, fear. When Naomi was brought out, I barely recognized her. Gone was the elegant woman with designer clothes and perfect makeup. Her face was pale, hair tangled, eyes hollow. She sat across the glass divider, hands trembling as she picked up the phone. I did the same. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "Thank you for coming." I looked at her, my voice steady. "I almost didn't." "I wouldn't blame you," she said with a weak laugh that sounded like it hurt to make. "But I had to tell you before it's too late." "Too late for what, Naomi?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Robert didn't just leave you the house, Gloria. He left you a debt." I frowned. "A debt?" She nodded quickly. "A large one. Old business loans, unpaid taxes, stuff buried in the paperwork. Your husband borrowed money years before he died. Some of it was under your name." My breath caught. "That can't be true. Robert would never." "It is true," she interrupted. "I didn't believe it either until I found the letters. They were hidden in the attic, under the insulation. I found them months ago when Ethan asked me to help clean up. That's when I realized the house wasn't safe." Denise leaned closer to the divider on my side. "What kind of letters?" Naomi glanced at her nervously. "From a man named Grant, Robert's former business partner. He's been threatening to collect. He's powerful, and he's not patient. The debt wasn't just financial, it was personal." I narrowed my eyes. "Personal how?" She looked down, her voice trembling. "Grant was in love with you, Gloria, before Robert married you. Robert borrowed money from him years later to save the business. When he couldn't pay it back, Grant wanted something else. Access to you. Robert refused, but after he died, Grant tried again. He sent letters demanding repayment. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd ruin Ethan's career. That's why I pushed for the house to be in our name. I thought I could protect us, but the more I fought, the more I lost myself." The words hit me like cold water. I wanted to laugh, to deny it, to say Robert would never keep something so huge from me. But the look in Naomi's eyes wasn't smug, it was haunted. Denise spoke up, her tone sharp. If this grant exists, why didn't you go to the police? Naomi shook her head quickly. I tried, but the letters stopped coming. I thought maybe he'd moved on. Until last month, when I saw his men watching the house. That's why I snapped, Gloria. I thought burning it would destroy whatever he wanted. The room spun for a moment. I had lived decades of my life believing I knew my husband, my family, my past. Now everything felt different, like the floor beneath me had shifted. I steadied my voice. Where are the letters now? Naomi looked up, eyes brimming. Hidden. I didn't want Ethan to see them. I left them behind the brick in the fireplace, the loose one near the mantel. Denise scribbled something down. We'll check it out. Naomi's gaze softened. I know you hate me, Gloria. I earned that, but I wasn't trying to steal your home. I was trying to keep it from being taken by someone worse. I didn't answer. I just stared at her through the glass, the weight of her confession pressing on my chest. As we stood to leave, she whispered, Be careful. He's still out there. On the drive back, Denise was unusually quiet. Do you believe her? I asked finally. Denise exhaled. I don't want to, but I've been a lawyer long enough to know when someone's telling the truth out of fear, not strategy. We'll check that fireplace. When we arrived at the burned remains of my house, the scent of smoke still lingered. The roof had collapsed, and most of the structure was unrecognizable, but the brick fireplace still stood. Denise put on gloves and began checking the base, tapping each brick until one gave way with a hollow sound. There, she whispered. I reached in, fingers trembling, and pulled out a plastic-wrapped bundle of papers, blackened around the edges but still intact. We took it back to Denise's house and laid the pages on the table. Inside were letters, old, yellowed, the ink fading but still legible. And there it was, Grant Wallace. The name leapt off every page. The words were venom, demands, threats, obsession. Robert owes me more than money. He owes me the years you stole from me. If I can't have her love, I'll have her legacy. Tell her she'll lose the house first. Then her son. My hands shook as I read them. Robert had tried to shield me from this. Naomi had found the truth too late. And now, even after all these years, the danger might not be gone. Denise looked at me gravely. We need to alert the authorities. This Grant Wallace isn't finished. I nodded, staring at the last line of the final letter, one written just weeks before Robert's death. If I can't collect what's mine in life, I'll find a way after I'm gone. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. And as the wind pressed against the windows, I felt it again, the same chill I'd felt the night Naomi slapped me. Something dark was coming. The rain came that night like punishment, heavy, relentless, and loud enough to drown out thought. It battered the windows of Denise's house, rattled the roof, and turned the streets into black mirrors. But inside her living room, the world was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fireplace and the low hum of the ceiling fan. The letters from Grant Wallace lay spread across the table between us, their ink now dry and dark as poison. Denise had been reading for hours, making notes, cross-referencing dates, tracing bank transactions through her laptop. But my eyes had gone numb from staring. All I could see was Robert's face in my mind, the man I trusted with my soul, woven now into this web of betrayal and secrets. Are you sure it's him? I asked, my voice faint. Denise looked up from the papers. The dates match. The signatures, the style, even the references to the business deals your husband had back then. Robert was desperate. It looks like this Grant Wallace bailed him out financially more than once. But it wasn't free money, it was leverage. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. And Robert never told me. Denise hesitated. Maybe he was trying to protect you. Or maybe he didn't want me to see what kind of man he'd become, I whispered. A silence stretched between us, long and heavy. Then, somewhere outside, a car engine idled. Denise frowned and crossed to the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to peek outside. The rain distorted the world into gray streaks, but I could see it too. A black sedan parked across the street. Headlights off, engine still running. Maybe it's nothing, she said carefully, though her tone betrayed her. Or maybe he's already found me. Gloria, don't, she warned. You're letting fear talk. But it wasn't just fear, it was instinct. The kind that whispers to old women when the air turns wrong. The phone rang suddenly, shrill and sharp. Denise jumped. I reached for it, my hands trembling. "Hello!" A man's voice, low and measured, slid through the receiver. "Mrs. Harper." I froze. "Who is this?" He ignored the question. "You've been reading my letters?" My heart stopped. "Grant Wallace." "Good," he said softly. "Then we can finally finish what Robert started. Why are you doing this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "Whatever Robert owed you, whatever this obsession is, it died with him." "Oh no," he said. "Robert's debt is very much alive. He gave me something that was never his to give." "What are you talking about?" His breath crackled over the line. "The land your house was built on. He bought it with my money. It was supposed to be mine. But when he couldn't pay, he signed it over illegally. The documents you found? They're my proof." I felt the world tilt. "You're lying." He chuckled. "Check the deed, Mrs. Harper. It's all there. And soon, so will I." The line went dead. I stood there frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear. Denise was already dialing the police. "We're not taking chances," she said. "He's threatened you directly." Within minutes, a patrol car arrived outside. 2 officers came in, took statements, and promised to increase surveillance near the house. But I could tell from their polite nods that they didn't take it seriously. To them, I was just an old woman with too much imagination. After they left, Denise turned to me. "Gloria, we're getting you somewhere safe." "Safe?" I repeated softly. "I've been running my whole life, Denise. From disappointment, from grief, from people who took more than they gave. Maybe it's time I stop." Her brow furrowed. "You can't face this man alone." "I don't plan to," I said. "But I won't live in fear either." The next morning, Ethan arrived with the children. Their little faces lit up when they saw me. "Grandma!" they cried, running into my arms. For the first time in weeks, I felt warmth that wasn't from fire or fear. I held them tight, breathing them in like air. Ethan stayed close, uneasy. "I heard about the call," he said quietly. "Do you think he'll really come?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I believe he wants something more than land." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "I think he wants control," I said. "He lost something long ago, maybe me, maybe his pride, and he's been chasing it through all of this." Denise returned from the courthouse later that afternoon with news. I spoke with an investigator. Grant Wallace's name is on several sealed records, fraud cases, bankruptcies, restraining orders. The man's dangerous and unhinged. But he's also clever. He knows how to disappear. "Then how do we stop him?" Ethan asked. She looked at me. "We expose him." It sounded simple, but we all knew it wasn't. That night, I sat alone by the fire, rereading Robert's old letters, the good ones, not Grant's. In one, date of the year before his death, Robert wrote, "If you ever find yourself surrounded by lies, trust only what was born from your own hands. The truth is there." The words struck something deep. "Born from my hands," I murmured. Then I remembered. Robert had once given me a small wooden jewelry box he said he'd made himself, the same one that used to sit on the nightstand beside our bed. I hadn't thought of it in years. After the fire, I assumed it was gone. But I suddenly recalled moving it to a storage unit when Naomi redecorated the bedroom last spring. I grabbed my coat. "Gloria!" Denise called. "Where are you going?" "To find the truth," I said. The storage facility sat on the edge of town, dark except for one flickering bulb over the entrance. The clerk recognized me immediately. "Unit 14C, right? Haven't seen you in a while, Mrs. Harper." Inside, the air smelled of dust and time. Boxes were stacked neatly, some labeled in my handwriting. Winter clothes, Christmas ornaments, Robert's tools. And there it was in the corner, the wooden jewelry box. I carried it to the small light and opened it. Inside were photos, trinkets, and beneath the lining, a folded document sealed in wax. My pulse quickened as I tore it open. It was a second deed, signed and dated before Robert's death. The true deed, and it proved that Grant Wallace had no claim to the property at all. In fact, Robert had filed it with a clause transferring all rights of ownership to me alone, explicitly nullifying any prior arrangements with Wallace. There was even a note attached in Robert's shaky handwriting. "If he ever comes back, show him this. He can't take what was never his." I pressed the paper to my chest, tears blurring my vision. But as I turned to leave, a sound behind me made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Beautiful piece of woodwork, isn't it? A man's voice drawled from the shadows. I froze. Grant Wallace stepped forward, his face older than I imagined, but his eyes sharp and hungry. Robert was a good craftsman. Shame he used his hands to hide from me. I clutched the document tightly. It's over, Grant. I know the truth. He smiled, a thin, dangerous curve. Do you, Mrs. Harper? Because I haven't come for the house anymore. Then what do you want? He stepped closer, the rain beginning to hammer against the metal roof. What's mine? He said softly. And that's you. Lightning flashed, illuminating the madness in his eyes. I took a step back toward the exit, my heart slamming against my ribs. If you take another step, I whispered, you'll regret it. He laughed. An old woman with trembling hands? What could you possibly do to me? But before I could answer, a voice roared behind him, Ethan's. Try me. Grant spun around, startled, just as Ethan lunged. The two men collided, crashing into a stack of boxes. The room filled with shouts, falling debris, and the metallic clang of tools scattering across the floor. I gripped the deed tighter, the thunder outside crashing like drums of war. It was chaos, until a single sound cut through everything. A gunshot, then silence. The gunshot echoed through the storage unit, deafening and final. For one suspended second, I couldn't move. The flash of light from the muzzle still burned in my eyes, mixing with the thunder outside. I could smell the gunpowder, sharp and acrid, mingling with the rain leaking through the tin roof. Ethan! I screamed, my voice raw. Ethan! He was on the floor, half hidden behind a toppled stack of boxes. Grant Wallace staggered backward, clutching his arm. A dark stain spread across his sleeve, dripping to the concrete. His gun clattered to the ground, sliding toward my feet. I didn't think. Instinct took over. I kicked it away, sending it skittering under a pile of crates. Ethan! I cried again, rushing to him. He groaned, turning his head slightly. I'm fine, Mom, he managed, wincing. It's just my shoulder. I pressed a shaking hand to his chest. You're bleeding. I'm okay, he whispered. He missed. Behind us, Grant let out a bitter laugh. He didn't miss. I moved. He slumped against the wall, his voice low and breathless. Guess I underestimated the boy after all. Denise burst into the doorway then, soaked from the storm, flashlight in hand, two officers right behind her. Gloria! Ethan! She shouted, eyes widening at the scene before her. The police rushed forward, guns drawn. Hands where we can see them. Grant raised his good arm weakly. About time, he muttered. I was starting to think I'd die here with ghosts. One officer cuffed him while another helped Ethan to his feet. I stood frozen, the document still clutched to my chest, my fingers trembling so hard I thought the paper might tear. Denise came to me, voice soft but urgent. Gloria, are you hurt? I shook my head slowly. No, but I think it's finally over. At the hospital, the adrenaline drained from my body, leaving behind an ache that felt older than my bones. Ethan's shoulder wound was superficial, a graze. The doctor said he was lucky. I sat beside his bed while he slept, my hand resting gently over his. Denise paced quietly near the door, talking to the officers who had come to take our statements. Grant Wallace is being charged with attempted murder, she explained when they left, and with multiple counts of fraud and coercion. The investigators found more documents in his car, proof of years of extortion. He's going away for a long time. I exhaled shakily. And Robert's name? Cleared, she said with a small smile. Turns out your husband tried to make things right before he died. He just didn't live long enough to stop Grant. Her words hit me like sunlight breaking through clouds. For so long, I'd carried resentment toward Robert, anger that he'd left me to face life alone, anger that he'd hidden so much. But now I saw it clearly. He hadn't hidden it to deceive me. He'd hidden it to protect me. When Ethan finally woke, the first thing he said was, "Is it morning yet?" "Almost," I whispered, brushing his hair from his forehead. He looked at me for a long time, his eyes glistening. "You saved me, Mom." I smiled faintly. "No, sweetheart. You saved yourself." 3 days later, We stood outside what was left of my property. The fire had gutted most of it, but the insurance money and the deed were now secure. A construction crew was already working on clearing debris, and the smell of sawdust and fresh earth filled the air. Naomi was still in custody. Her court date had been postponed, but through her lawyer, she'd sent a short note. I was wrong about everything. Tell Ethan I'm sorry, and tell Mrs. Harper thank you for listening. I folded the note quietly and slipped it into my purse. I didn't know what the future held for her, but forgiveness had already begun to bloom where the ashes had been. Denise joined us, coffee in hand. They'll start laying the foundation next week, she said. The inspector signed off this morning. I nodded, staring at the ground where the front steps used to be. I want to rebuild it exactly how it was, but with stronger walls. She smiled. You always did have good taste in fortresses. Ethan chuckled softly beside me, his arm still bandaged. We could make a few updates too. Maybe an extra room. One for you, one for the kids. No more attics full of secrets. I laughed then, really laughed, for the first time in months. No more secrets. I liked the sound of that. That evening, after everyone left, I stayed behind for a while. The sun was setting, painting the sky in gold and lavender. I walked through what used to be my garden, where small shoots of green were beginning to rise from the soot. Robert's ring glinted faintly on my finger, and I pressed it against my lips. You did what you could, love, I whispered. And now I'll do the rest. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of smoke and rain, and I felt something inside me ease. Maybe the house would never be the same. Maybe the years had taken too much. But in that moment, I knew I had rebuilt something far more important, my strength. My voice. My family. As I turned to leave, headlights swept across the property. Ethan returning with the children, their laughter spilling out of the car as they jumped onto the grass, running toward me with open arms. Grandma, can we help plant the new garden? The little one shouted. I knelt down, hugging them tightly. Yes, baby. This time, we'll plant everything together. Ethan smiled, standing behind them, his eyes soft. We're home, Mom, he said quietly. I looked at the fading light, at the ground that had burned and lived again, and nodded. Yes, I whispered. We are. Weeks passed. The house began to rise again. Walls, windows, doors, all new but somehow familiar. The community helped. Neighbors donated furniture, church members brought food, and every afternoon, the children painted small stones to line the garden path. One evening, as I sat on the porch of the half-built home, Denise joined me with 2 cups of tea. You know, she said, I think you should tell your story. Women need to hear this. About strength, about surviving, about not letting people rewrite your life. I smiled, watching the sun dip low. Maybe I will. Maybe it's time people see what quiet power looks like. She raised her cup. To quiet power. I clinked mine against hers. And to starting over. The night air was warm and full of crickets when I finally went inside. I placed Robert's letter and the new deed into a frame above the mantel, symbols of what had been lost and found. As I turned off the light, I glanced once more at the window. The garden glowed faintly under the moon, rows of fresh soil ready for planting. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. My story had burned down to its bones, and what remained was strong enough to stand forever. For 2 whole days, the letter sat untouched on the kitchen counter. I'd moved it from one corner to another, pretending I didn't see it, telling myself it was just a mistake, an old piece of mail, maybe even a leftover from the investigation. But deep down, I knew better. The envelope was plain. No stamp, no return address. Just my name scrawled in shaky black ink, Mrs. Gloria Harper. And inside, those 2 words, not finished. When I finally tore it open on the 3rd morning, my hands were steady. Fear had burned out of me a long time ago. What remained was something harder, resolve. I took the letter straight to Denise. She was on her porch, sipping her coffee, the morning sun turning her silver hair into threads of light. Her eyes narrowed when she saw it. No postmark, she murmured, flipping it over. Deliver by hand. Whoever left this knows where you live. That's what I was afraid of, I said quietly. You think it's Grant Wallace? He's in custody, I reminded her. The police said he's awaiting trial. But men like him don't work alone. Denise sighed, setting down her cup. All right, we'll take it to Detective Mendez. He's still handling the case. At the police station, Detective Mendez examined the letter under a small desk lamp. His dark eyes moved over the words. Thoughtful, calculating. It's his handwriting, he said finally. Wallace must have had someone deliver it for him. Maybe a friend or former associate. I frowned. But why now? He's behind bars. Control, Mendez said simply. He wants to remind you that he can still reach you. He's testing your reaction. So what do we do? Denise asked. He handed the envelope back carefully. You do nothing. You live your life. We'll handle the rest. But something about the calm in his voice didn't sit right with me. Because people like Grant Wallace didn't send messages for nothing. That night, after Ethan put the children to bed, we sat on the porch of the newly rebuilt house. The night breeze carried the scent of paint and sawdust. The garden lights flickered softly, illuminating the small seedlings the kids had planted earlier that week. Mom, Ethan said quietly, you think he'll come back? I hesitated, watching the fireflies hover near the fence. I think people like him never stop trying to win. But you can't live your life waiting for ghosts. He nodded slowly. You're stronger than I ever knew. I smiled faintly. I wasn't always. Sometimes life has to break you to show you what you're made of. He reached for my hand. I don't know how to thank you for not giving up on me. You already did, I said softly. You came home. We sat in silence for a long time, just listening to the sound of crickets and the distant rumble of thunder over the hills. It wasn't the kind of silence that hurt anymore. It was peace, real and deep. But peace is fragile. When I went inside later, I noticed something strange. The back door, newly installed, double-locked that morning, was slightly open. Just an inch, maybe 2. Enough for the night air to slip in. I froze. Ethan! I called quietly. He appeared at the top of the stairs. Yeah, Mom. Did you leave the back door open? He frowned. No. Why? Before I could answer, a sound came from the kitchen. A slow, deliberate scrape. Ethan moved down the stairs, motioning for me to stay back. My heart hammered as he grabbed the nearest thing he could find, a heavy wrench from the toolbox near the door. When he reached the kitchen, the sound stopped. The house went silent except for the faint creak of the floorboards. Then a voice, low and calm, came from the shadows. Mrs. Harper. My blood turned to ice. Ethan swung the wrench upward. Show yourself. A tall man stepped into the dim light from the hallway. He wasn't Grant Wallace, but he wore the same smirk, the same quiet arrogance. His suit was soaked from the rain outside, his hair slicked back. I come with a message, he said coolly. From Mr. Wallace. I stepped forward. You can tell your friend the message was received and ignored. He smiled. That's not wise, ma'am. Mr. Wallace is not a man who takes being ignored kindly. Ethan tightened his grip. You need to leave. Right now. The man's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me. Mr. Wallace wanted you to have this. He reached into his coat pocket slowly and placed a small envelope on the counter. He said it's the real ending. Before either of us could move, he turned and slipped out through the back door, disappearing into the rain like he'd never been there. Ethan locked the door behind him, cursing under his breath. Mom, this has to stop. We're going back to the police first thing in the morning. I nodded slowly, my eyes fixed on the envelope. It was identical to the last one, plain, unmarked, except for a single word written on the front. Confession. Denise came first thing the next morning, and we gathered around the kitchen table like detectives in some old movie. The children were at school, and the house was quiet except for the ticking of the wall clock. Ethan handed me a letter opener. Let's end this. I slid it open carefully, pulling out a folded sheet of paper. It was handwritten in the same dark ink, neat and deliberate. To Mrs. Gloria Harper. I won't see daylight again. The courts will make sure of that. But before I go, you deserve the truth. Robert didn't steal from me. I lied. I told him I'd help him rebuild his business if he gave me your trust. But it wasn't business I wanted. It was revenge. I couldn't stand to see him happy after he married you, the woman I loved first. He refused to let me near you. So I destroyed him piece by piece, until he broke. He died believing I'd ruin you too. But he underestimated you, Gloria. You were stronger than both of us. I've made peace with my end. But tell your husband, if there's such a place as where he rests now, he won. GW. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Denise exhaled slowly. Well, she said softly, that's one way to close a chapter. Ethan leaned back, shaking his head. He spent his life chasing ghosts. And you, he looked at me. You outlived them all. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and set it on the table. Not out of spite, I said quietly. Out of survival. Weeks turned into months. The trial came and went. Grant Wallace's name made the papers for a few days, then vanished, swallowed by the next scandal. Naomi was sentenced to community service and therapy. The court believed her breakdown had been fueled by fear and manipulation. And me, I rebuilt my home, brick by brick, just like I promised. But I also built something else, a life no longer defined by loss. I started a small community garden in the empty lot next door. Women from the neighborhood came by every weekend. Widows, mothers, grandmothers, each with their own story of betrayal and rebirth. We planted roses and jasmine, tomatoes and sage, and sometimes laughter. Ethan bought a swing set for the kids, and every evening I'd watch them play as the sun dipped low, their laughter carrying across the grass like music. One evening, Denise brought me a small envelope. From the publisher, she said with a grin. Inside was a copy of the book she'd helped me finish. The House That Stood Again, A Story of Quiet Power. I ran my fingers over the title, tears welling up. Do you think people will read it? I asked. Denise smiled. They'll do more than read it, Gloria. They'll feel it. That night, after everyone went to bed, I stepped outside one last time. The moonlight bathed the garden in silver. The air was cool and alive, filled with the scent of new blossoms. I sat in the old rocking chair we'd rescued from the ashes, closed my eyes and whispered, Robert, it's done. We're safe now. A soft wind brushed past, rustling the leaves like an answer. And for the first time in my 75 years, I realized that strength wasn't loud. It didn't shout or fight or rage. It simply stood, quiet, steady and unbreakable. Like a house rebuilt from ashes. Like a woman who refused to fall. Epilogue. Months later, the mailbox at the end of my driveway filled with congratulations. Letters from women around the country who'd heard my story. Some said it gave them courage to leave bad marriages. Others said it reminded them that healing was possible, no matter how late in life it came. One letter, though, made me smile more than any other. It was from Naomi. Thank you for forgiving me. I'm working on being someone my children can be proud of. I still call you Mom when I pray. I hope that's all right. I folded it gently and placed it beside Robert's ring on the mantel. Then I looked out the window at the sunrise. A new day, mine finally.